Welcome to the latest edition of Lunchtime Learning. I'm delighted and honoured to be joined today by Susan Gregory. Susan is a consultant in a state agency and organisational development. Got it right? Yes. Loads of practice. Susan, welcome. How are you?
Very well, Stephen. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honour to be here.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. I saw you at the Women in State Agency conference on the residential in women property panel. Yeah. I thought it was absolutely exceptional. We will touch on that shortly. I want to come back to that, but tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the property industry, please.
Yeah, thank you. I kind of came in as a second career, so I'm 43 now, and came into state agency when I was 27. I think I'd always, typical, loved property, loved people. Dropped out of school during my A levels because it just wasn't for me. I'm much more kind of a in-person learner, experiential learner, and kind of got into the state agency because I loved working with people, but also kind of helping with big problems and selling, buying properties is a big thing. It matters to people. And in those last, 16 odd years, I've been a leader in pretty much every type of estate agency you can imagine. So corporate, high street, independent, charity owned, prop tech startups. And here I am now.
Fantastic. What I like to do is I like to unpack a lot of those things because obviously you've been a leader in many types of businesses, as you just suggested there. What are the lessons that you've learned, say, working for a corporate, working for a charity, working for an independent?
I think that one of the actual biggest things I've learned looking back, so in 2020, I undertook a master's. So although I dropped out of my A levels, I actually, at the age of 40, did a master's degree. And I did that because I was seeing so many similarities in the way that all of those estate agency models, if you like, operate. Whether you're talking about an independent in the high street, whether you're talking about the largest corporates that we have, they're very similar in terms of their structures, their systems, their reward systems, their targets, all of that. And I kind of started to think, why is that? And does it really work? And through the masters, I really, which was in organisational development, it answered a lot of questions for me around why do we have the reward systems that we have, and are there better ways of doing it? And I believe that there are, and that kind of ties into things like inclusion and diversity, and who we attract and who we retain, and women in the state agency and women in residential property. So I guess my biggest learnings out of that is that although there are many differences, there are more similarities. And for me, that means there are more opportunities to do things differently that work for people who maybe we don't retain in our industry in a way that maybe we should.
Okay, so I agree. Retention is a challenge. Finding and hiring is a challenge. I went to see Stephen Bartlett a couple of weeks ago. Live, and he was talking about how he goes through 20 CVs every single day to find the right sort of talent, which is credible. He said you should always be networking to find that right person. So coming back, you talked about rewards. So and you said actually companies should be doing things differently and maybe rewarding people in a different way. So how can they do that?
For me, it comes back to actually something called intrinsic motivation. So in a state agency, and I'll caveat all of this with I love estate agency. I've had a really great career in it. It's a career that, as I've mentioned, I came into without qualifications. And I think that's one of our biggest assets, is that actually, you can come in and make a really good career without having been to university, etc. But what we can then do is actually attract people who are people who are service orientated, who are all those things that we say we are as an industry. But actually, when you look under the bonnet, we target and reward based on short-term sales targets. And those are two really different mentalities, to be a service provider or a target-driven salesperson. And what I find fascinating about that is not only do we kind of seem to fall between this gap of saying we're a service industry, but we act like salespeople. But actually, even with the way that our industry works, it doesn't correlate to be a monthly targeted profession, because nothing happens monthly. It's not like we produce a house, it goes on a conveyor belt, we scan it as a, you know, with a barcode, and then we sell it and it's done. It's much more complex than that. It's much more complicated than that. So it almost doesn't align with the way that the reality is of buying and selling property to have short-term sales targets. So there's that part of it, which I find really interesting, but also there's that part about intrinsic motivation. So we are all intrinsically motivated. We all want to do great things. We all want to be of service. We hear it all the time about people kind of going, what was your most successful thing? And it's not that I got this, you know, amazing commission. It's that I really helped these people make a really big move that was really difficult. And it's because I spent time, or I understood, or I listened. That's what really, really inspires great people. And so focusing more on understanding your team's intrinsic motivations, and almost decoupling that from I need to earn a living, or I need to put food on the table and pay the bills, because what we can tend to do at the moment is actually we lose that intrinsic motivation because we're pushing people into something that actually means they've got to do a quick win.
Really, really interesting. So understanding team motivation. So if I've got a team, 5, 10, 1, doesn't matter, how do I find out what actually motivates it, what motivates my colleagues? I mean, you said going under the bonnet, and it's really interesting because I remember my old Green & Co days, and we had started off, I think we were in a new office in Crouch End, and we had a lettings team of 4, including property management, a letting coordinator, and I think it was maybe October, they did 30 lets, and they'd done brilliantly, and it was absolutely an incredible month and fantastic. And obviously I wanted to motivate them and keep the same level for November, being a greedy short-term salesperson as I was at the time. And so I said, so what would you like, you know, what would motivate you to, you know, get to a similar sort of levels? And I was pretty shocked at the answer. They wanted a big night out in London. Okay, so I said, well, you know, what will that cost me? And they said £1,000. And I said, sorry? So what are you going for? So, well, we go for a nice steak. We get absolutely legless. We go and have a nice, whatever it was. Honestly, I've never seen people work so hard to get legless and have a night out in London. But it was just interesting for me because that was their motivation, you know, to go out and have a big night and enjoy themselves. So how do you really understand what your team's motivation is?
The most important thing is to ask the questions and really try to understand them as individuals. And everyone is different. I think on a surface level, there is something about, you know, ask the question, what do you want? We have to also understand the reality that the people we're talking to are in a current system. They're in a current system that tells them that the commission structure is right, that has attracted them to some degree to that. So you've got to start to unpick that. And the only way you can unpick that is by having what's called kind of psychological safety. So for example, if you're a leader and you say things like, my door is always open, but you're not doing anything for it to feel safe for that person to walk through that door, it's a pointless thing to say. So how are you really providing psychological safety to people so that they can answer that question with honesty? I'm going to talk about women slightly a little bit now. For example, we are in a male-dominated industry at senior level. It is a problem. We are therefore those leaders are understandably recreating the same patterns that were successful for them, that they enjoyed. And women, and all of us, are different. And it's difficult, I don't like to generalize, but for a woman to say, actually, what would make me feel really valued is to have a half day off. Now, a man might say that as well, or to be able to go and do something, or whatever it might be. To get to the nub of what's important to somebody, they have to feel safe to say that and not to be laughed at, or to go, oh, does that mean they're not as motivated as somebody else, or does that mean they're not as aligned with us as somebody else? So it's a lot of personal work for that leader to actually have to do, to be curious enough and interested enough to really listen and to really create space for people to answer with honesty, and for all of those answers to be welcome, even if they're not what people expect.
So I think there was an interesting stat that I think it was it a 50-50 split of ladies and gentlemen in the industry, but yet the amount of people, ladies in high jobs was, I think it was 7 or 11%. I think it's very low, the numbers.
It's so low, and this is actually where my masters came from, because I remember I was experiencing it. So I'd risen through the ranks, climbed the ladder, whatever it is, whatever you want to call it. But I was noticing that actually, in order to do that, and I mentioned this at the Women's Leadership Conference, I almost had to behave in a way that isn't quite my authentic self. You know, I had to fit into the systems and structures of what that looked like. And I was kind of going at my masters, I was going, why the thing about a state agency and our gender pay gap, and the fact that we don't have proportional number of women in senior leadership position, that really, really bothers me, is that we attract them in the first place. So it's not as if we're an industry that, that doesn't attract women in the first place. We have thousands of incredible women in our industry, and we've got some really great senior leaders, don't get me wrong, but actually the proportion of women that we have at the lower quartiles is over 50%, and then as we go up it drops to below 25%. That is massively problematic. It's problematic because it means we're not getting that diverse skill set. It's problematic because it means, from a business perspective, like you've touched on, retention, it's huge trying to retain people. The costs of that are massive. And then the data also shows us that organizations that have a more diverse senior leadership are more profitable. So it doesn't make business sense to be operating like that. And then for me, it's how what is actually going on. And again, we touched about this on the conference, that means that's happening. Why are we losing these great women who are, I see it all the time, and I see it in forums and I see it in conversations, and they're saying, I'm just sick of it. I'm sick of not being heard. I'm sick of not being listened to. I'm sick of not feeling that I'm valued. I'm going to leave the industry. And it makes me want to scream, because they've been in the industry for maybe even 20 years and they're just, I've had enough. I've had enough.
One, how's it going to change? And two, how do we make it change?
Really good question. And I remember being asked this on another sofa. And I looked back, and that was 3 years ago that I sat on a sofa and I was asked, the sofa, and I was asked, what do women need to do about it? And I said, this is not a women problem. This is not a women problem. It's an all of us problem. If you're going, so how do we make it change? For me, if you're going for an interview, maybe in a large organization where they are legally obliged to share their gender pay gap, look at it. Now, there's all of our large organizations have significant gender pay gaps. That is the facts. So there's no point kind of going, you've got a big gender pay gap, I'm not going to work for you. Go to an interview and ask what they're doing about it. Bring it up. Come through into the industry or into a next position talking about it, and see what kind of answers you get. Are they aware of it? Do they care about it? Do they seem to actually understand what's going on? We can all do that. And then as leaders, as I say, it's about looking at what systems, structures, processes are we habitually using that are actually causing this to be a systemic issue. It's a systemic issue that can be fixed. We've seen it with COVID. We've seen it actually, if we start to move the dial, we can do amazing things. One of the things I've learned that's really, I think, important to share is that what you're actually asking leaders to do there is change their mindset. And that's a huge thing to do. If you've kind of built a business or you're leading a business and this is what good looks like, and it's always been that way, to start to go, okay, but maybe there's another way. Or what are we not seeing here? Or who are we losing, and why might that be? It's actually quite a vulnerable place to be, because you're starting to unpick things you thought were always true.
I've been to the Women in the State Agency conference twice now. I think I'm most probably very naive. I think I learned a considerable amount of stuff that I hadn't even considered thinking about. So going back to agency, and Sam, who passed away sadly, didn't go through the menopause. So, and when I sat in a panel and somebody was talking about the menopause, I honestly didn't understand what they were talking about. when ladies, are on periods and stuff like that, and how what leaders do to provide whatever they need to do in the toilets and stuff like that. Just all these things didn't occur to me. Claire Yates's story, I was absolutely mortified and horrified to listen to. On your panel when you were talking about Charlie Hull and the recent video on there, which was absolutely incredible. And for me, I think mindset is really important to understand and learn about, being in your shoes and getting to understand it and thinking about this whole thing. So it was a real eye opener for me. And it definitely helped me. And I think there were more men there this year, which was obviously which was obviously a good thing. And hopefully by watching this and listening to this, people can get a better understanding of why there is such a gender pay gap, why there is such diversity, and lack of inclusion, and find ways of going out there, improving it, and maybe learning more about it. And understanding it more.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's about learning, and it's really difficult we pigeonhole ourselves then into women and men and all of these things. And actually, we've all got multiple things that define us. So I'm a woman of 43. I don't have children. I'm probably going to become perimenopause at some point. I don't know a lot about the menopause, and so it's not like, oh, women know about it, we need to hear from them. It's like, what don't I know about that might be impacting the people that I work with? And being curious to the fact that we're all coming from different experiences. We've all got different things going on in our home lives. We've all got things that impact us in different ways. And actually, the more we can share that and understand that, the more we can create environments that allow everybody to flourish. And I think that's what it ultimately comes down to. And as a leader, your role, as far as I'm concerned, is to enable your team to flourish. And that means creating the environment, the systems, the support networks that allow others to do great work and be the best versions of themselves, whatever that is. But we can only do that if we accept that people are different from us.
So obviously you've worked with a number of agents, and you've done your master's degree. So what does, in your opinion, a great leader look like now?
I'm going to come back to the word that has been around quite a bit recently, and actually for me it's vulnerability. It's authenticity and vulnerability. Why I think those are the two most important things is what we tend to do is manage. We tend to plan and manage as if we have control of things, and as if we operate in a vacuum. Here's our 5-year plan, and we will stick to it come hell or high water. Now, there's nothing wrong with having a 5-year plan. We must have goals. More important than goals, we must have purpose. A leader that can define a purpose is for me instrumental, because if you align behind a purpose, it doesn't matter what gets in the way. It doesn't matter when things change, which they will, because we don't live in a vacuum. But if you kind of go, right, this is what we're aiming for, this is what we stand for, this is what we believe in, when those things happen, you can pivot and move, because you can say, right, okay, but how is this going to take us to the thing that we really care about? And what that also allows is for autonomy. So when you can kind of say to people, right, these are the things that we stand for, this is what we're here to do, this is what matters to us, you can then kind of go about that in ways that, again, allow for that individualization, that allow for that autonomy, that allow for people to do that in a way that works for them. And when we're dealing with members of the public, that authenticity is so important. When you're sitting on somebody's sofa, building rapport, understanding their situation, if you can talk about it or present yourself in a way that is your authentic self, then you're going to build that rapport in a much better way. So leaders that can bring that to the table and encourage that in others, in the complex world that we live in, will have companies and people that thrive.
How do you find what your purpose is?
Really good question. It was actually ended up being the subject of my dissertation for my master's, because I'm purpose driven, and actually it's the thing that is like the lowest common denominator. So when you kind of go, what do you stand for, what's important to you, it's like your why. I mean, we all know kind of Simon Sinek's why, but it's not that first answer. I want to make money, nothing wrong with that. I want to do this. It's why. Why is that? Why is that? Why is that? Why are we in a estate agency? Why are we doing what we do? Keep going down until you really can't answer it anymore. And it might take 4 or 5 levels to get there. And you can ask people around you. I think the interesting thing for leaders is marrying or coupling that organizational purpose with the individual purpose of yourself and your team. So what's your organizational purpose? What's your branch's purpose? What's your business's purpose? And that's not a goal. That's not to be the number one in the town. That's a goal. It's to impact change that's bigger than you. So when you define purpose is something that is bigger than you as an individual or bigger than you as an organization. So it's to create, a moving process that fundamentally changes people's perception of estate agency, something like that.
Okay, so how do you get your team to buy into your purpose, or do you have to find out what their purpose is in order to marry them together?
It's really interesting to kind of retrofit it. So if you're really clear on what your purpose is, and you then actually exhibit that in how you show up and how you communicate. So once you've got that purpose, it basically becomes a decision maker for everything. How you recruit, who you recruit, how you reward, etc. Are we doing this in line with our purpose, or are we not? You then attract people who are in line with your purpose, who care about what you care about, who want to make the change that you want to make. When you're kind of trying to retrofit it, you've got to have some quite open conversations, because you'll have people who maybe it isn't aligned with. And actually that is always the case. And not everyone will be aligned with your purpose. It's then what you decide to do about that. But once you hold it like a flag in the sand and go, right, that's what we stand for, you will attract like-minded people. And like-minded people is again about people who believe in that, but can come at it from different ways. Again, it allows for that diversity. I can believe in that, and I see it, and I can deliver it in a different way from you, and that's of great value.
So how do you go out and attract these like-minded people? How do they find that they've got a similar purpose to you then, and bring them into your business?
So when I was at Nested, which I was kind of in its very, very early days, our values and our purpose were kind of centered, and they still are with the way Alice works. They were centered to everything. They come into your job descriptions, they come into your first interviews, they come into your second interviews. You ask people to demonstrate how they are aligned to them, or what they mean to them, or how they resonate with them, etc. So you've got to put it out there. And again, what we can do in our industry is kind of hide behind management systems. So this is what matters to us, and they're actually quite small management systems. It can be quite uncomfortable to put out there, this is what we stand for, this is what we want to achieve in the world. But stepping into that then attracts those people. But you've got to put it out there. You've got to have it on your website. You've got to have it on your communications. You've got to have it, as I say, in your job descriptions, all of those things. And be really proud of it. Be really proud that you actually stand for something which is more than we sell houses. We impact lives. We make change for people. We reduce anxiety, whatever it might be. Selling a house is a cog in a wheel of someone's life, a change happening in somebody's life, and actually we influence that, and that's really massive and very purposeful.
It is. Thank you. Final question, if that's okay with you, because I'm really conscious of time and I'm very grateful for you coming on, so thank you. So who inspires Susan Gregory?
First person that comes into my mind is my awesome mother. So there are many amazing people in our industry that inspire me, but my mum, yeah. So she came over to England as an 18-year-old from Ireland with nothing but a shirt on her back, and has done amazing things in her life, and continues to now at 78. She's just turned 78. She's still lecturing, and she got a PhD many years ago now. But yeah, still learning. Always be learning.
Great. And actually, on that point, what are you doing then to continuously learn and self-improve, and anything that you recommend?
Always read.
What's in your library?
Oh God, so many, honestly, and there's literally them on the floor here and everything.
If you had to pick,
I'm reading academic. Sorry.
If you had to pick one book for people to choose to listen to,
Actually, for this conversation, it would be Daniel Pink Drive. There we go. And that's about motivations, intrinsic motivations, giving people autonomy, mastery, and purpose, and that they flourish when you do that. And so, yeah, give Daniel Pink Drive a read.
Brilliant. Well, look, if people want to get hold of you, Susan, how do they do that, please?
I'm all over LinkedIn and email susan@turnersoak.co.uk. But yeah, you'll find me easily on LinkedIn.
Brilliant. Well, look, thanks so much for your time. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. Really grateful. And I look forward to seeing you on the next podcast. Bye.
Thanks, Susan.